Hey everyone, I'm Tyler with Ligari Products. We have one of the world's largest databases of epoxy tutorials on actual projects where you can learn anything and everything that has to do with epoxy. What you're looking at right here is our Ligari Stone Kit, and you're gonna see the full tutorial right now, so let's get to it. All right, so I'm gonna go over priming, how to apply it, how to mix it. Very simple process. We have everything we need here. We got our primer, we got our jug to mix it in, 2 ounces of water because we're gonna mix that with the primer, the roller tray, gloves, tape for de-shedding the roller, and we're gonna be using a 3/8 snap roller. So de-shed it before you put your gloves on. Sometimes it's hard to get the tape started with your gloves on, so we'll do the de-shedding first. All right, so I'm just gonna pull some of the tape out. We're gonna run our roller on the tape and it's gonna pull off any loose fibers. That's how you de-shed the roller. We'll put our gloves on, and then we want to shake up the part A. Give it a little bit of a shake, make sure nothing's settled in there, and then we'll pour it into a container. These are already pre-measured. You don't have to use a mixing container. You just want to make sure you use at least 1 quart size mixing container. That'll fit your countertop kit primer into. Then we're going to add our part B, the pigmented part. I'm not worried about shaking this up because we will be adding the water into here, shaking it up because you can tell it's a little thicker material. Tilt it back, get any stuff that's in that handle. And then we'll take our 2 ounces of water. You want to use clean water. And then we'll just shake that up. And then we'll dump into the container. All right, so mixing the primer is really easy. We're just going to use a stir stick. Obviously, you don't want to start mixing it really fast and splash it everywhere. This is going to be our white primer. So we want to mix this for about 2-3 minutes at most. Again, just continually scraping the sides, the bottom. All right, primer's ready. Get the stuff off the counter. So we're just gonna use the roller tray. And since we are going over a darker counter, we're probably gonna need to do 2 coats of primer, especially on the faces. And you'll kind of see why once we get started. So we'll take a second, kind of soak it up in the roller. Let that roller get saturated with the primer. And then we're just gonna do a pass down the middle. And then we'll just cross roll that. Now, a few things to keep in mind when you're priming. You want to apply your epoxy coat over the primer within 2 hours. You don't want to wait longer than that. If you wait longer than that, you run the chance of the primer getting too hard, creating a glass-like finish. So if you're not able to epoxy over your primer within an hour or 2, we don't recommend applying the primer. Wait until you can do that. If for some reason you applied the primer and weren't able to epoxy it, stuff happens. You can either scuff it up with some 320 grit, or you can do like a denatured alcohol wipe with a rag, and that'll kind of make the primer a little sticky, and then apply your epoxy right over that. So I like to roll out the top, and then make sure I don't have any thick roller edges. Roller lines aren't a big deal. You just don't want like really thick roller lines. And then we'll work on our faces. Now your faces are your most critical part. Your vertical edges, your corners. You want these to be a solid color of whatever primer you're using. And you can notice that even though it's white, I can kind of see through it a little bit. So I'm going to definitely want to hit those edges one more time before we start coating. The top's not as big a deal because the resin's going on so much thicker on the top. But all your edges, and even like an inch in from from your edge, you want to make sure those are nice and white. And this goes for, say, a black primer over a white countertop. You'd probably have to do your edges twice. And we send plenty primer to be able to do 2 coats. So you'll have enough as long as you're not trying to stretch the kit too far. So we're just going to continue that process till all the counters are primed. And this is a fast cure primer, so by the time I'm done applying this first layer, I can go back and hit all my edges again because it'll already be starting to set up. So it's a really amazing primer. Now we did a decorative edge with Bondo on here. We've coated over it a couple times, so it's not as textured as the first time, but it still looks really cool. If you're wondering why this has got a texture to it, that's why. But notice how thin we put it on, and you can see how much we have left. We have about half the 32-ounce cup left and a bunch in the roller tray. So you have plenty primer to do 2 coats if you need to. Now again, I'm not worried about the top because it's going to go on a lot thicker. It's going to cover, so I don't need to necessarily hit this twice. You can if you want. I'm just worried about the faces and about 1 inch in from the top edge. I want to get that nice and white. And then if you have any spots, sometimes when you're going over Formica, you'll get fish eyes or separating. The primer will separate in spots from like some silicone residue or some kind of contamination. Similar to what these are, you just let that set up a little and then roll over it. And it'll fill back in and the primer will be sticky, starting to set up, and they won't fish eye out again. So I can already start doing my edges again. I don't necessarily want to dip the whole roller in the roller tray and get a ton of primer on it. I want to just kind of get a little bit on there. So I'll get a little bit on the roller and kind of roll it out evenly. Just barely dip it in there. And then we'll go around and hit our edges, and you'll see how much wider this will be with this second coat. And again, come up on the edge a little bit. And if it's pulling your primer away, your first layer away, then you got to wait a little bit longer. You might be going a little bit too early, but you don't want to overwork it. You want to just roll it on real quick and move on. So you can see the difference from a second coat versus 1 coat. Big difference. So that's kind of what we're trying to do on our faces, get that nice and solid color that the primer is. Then again, I'll wrap it on the top just a little bit. That's all we're looking for right there. You can see, I mean, we just rolled this, and I'm able to go over it again because it's that fast cure primer. It just sets up really quick once it's rolled out. It's not going to set up in the bucket on you or the roller tray. It's just an absolutely amazing primer. So I'm just running around the bottom, making sure I don't have any drips or thick spots under there. And then if you guys want, you can also take the primer, prime on your sink edge where it's just raw wood, and you can also prime up under there to kind of seal that surface in. I'm not going to here. We've already done it a couple times, so it's already sealed up. But it's real simple. Once you're done with rolling out the primer, because you don't want to roll in here and get some wood debris on your roller, do that last. You can roll under there, kind of seal that up. So this primer takes about 45 minutes to an hour to set up enough before we can apply the epoxy. If you guys throw a fan on and get some air movement, it can dry even faster. So we're going to turn a fan on, get this to set up really quick, and then we'll start doing our taping off the edges, creating that dam for the Lagari Stone Kit. All right, so I'm going to go over taping your edges off. The primer's ready. It's sticky, but it's not pulling off, okay? So that's what you're looking for. You don't want to rush taping on the primer if you have wet spots. It's obviously not going to seal good. We're looking for that nice tight seal where we don't get any leaks or resin running through the tape. So we're going to be using yellow painter's tape, best stuff to use. It sticks really well. All right, so we want to tape high. If I tape too low and just barely have the tape above it, the Lagari Stone Kits are poured a lot thicker. And if that resin gets to the top or close to the top of that tape, it can fold it over and start to leak over the tape. So we want to make sure we're taping high enough. And I usually do about half of the tape width. Really simple process. So I'll pull it out and then I'll twist the tape in, get it where I want it down here, and then I just push it in. All right, so there's one. We're going to do one more. We like to do 2 rows, and I'm going to try to keep it at the same height or close to. Doesn't have to be exact. All right, next thing, we want to really press that tape in good. Get a nice tight seal. Go around the whole counter. Press that in really good. Make sure we're getting that sealed up everywhere, especially on the corners. Now, last thing we're going to do, we're just going to pinch these corners in. Just barely pinch them. It'll tighten that tape up just a little bit. Just like that. That's how we tape off for the Lagari Stone Kits. Now what this is going to do, it's going to keep the resin from just running off the edge, and when we're ready to pull it, once the resin sets up, we'll pull it, and the design on the top is going to stay the same because it's not all running off. when you guys get in the inside corners, really press that in there good. We don't want to have any gaps there. Now you really want to make sure if you sanded your counters, make sure these edges are clean before you prime. You really want to get those clean, because if that primer is going over like some dusty edges or you didn't clean it good, we go to pull the tape, the primer had a bond breaker with dust or debris, you run the chance of pulling that primer off. So really make sure these faces are clean before you prime. And that goes with basically the whole countertop surface. You want it really, really clean. So everything's pushed in good. Crease our corners. That just pulls a little tension on all the rest of the tape. Our sink area also. All right, so last one, and this is where we did the decorative edge. So obviously getting a nice tight seal in all these gaps where the edge we did with the Bondo is kind of a pain. So we're gonna kind of push on the top here instead of on the edge. We still wanna push on that edge, but I'll kind of show you, we'll get a better seal by focusing on the top corner. All right, so we'll still push down on the faces, but since we have the decorative edge, we're gonna come in and just round that edge just a tad bit. That's gonna give us a good seal on the flat surface there. And that's it. So now we're ready to mix the resin up, do our thin flood coat, and then start the Ligari kit process.
We're going to show you how to mix up this Ligari stone kit. So it's going to come with a gallon and a half of our pigmented white, a gallon and a half of our standard metallic epoxy, as well as 2 truffles and a midnight pearl. So I want to show you how to mix this up to create the most beautiful look. The other thing you'll need to get is this color from Rust-Oleum. This is French Beige from Rust-Oleum. Beautiful color. So we're also going to use some of this. So the first thing we want to do is we want to give Tyler enough white to put a base coat on everything, just a thin base coat. So what we need to do that is a 2.5 quart container and a 1 quart container. It's nice to just have a bunch of these containers. I have 3 1 quart containers. I have 9 2.5 quart containers, and I probably have 11 of these 5 quart containers. I just like having a stack of these around in case I need to grab another one or in case I break one. That's happened before. But the first thing we want is we want one of these 2.5 quart containers and a 1 quart container, and we'll actually probably use another 2.5 quart container. So grab the pigmented white epoxy, We're going to take part A, and we're going to pour out 42 ounces. And if we have 42 ounces of A, because our epoxy is 2 to 1, we need 21 ounces of B. We have some stir sticks here. We have some 5-gallon stir sticks and some standard stir sticks or paint sticks. Just going to pour the B, the 21 ounces of B, into the 42 ounces of A. Have a drill set up. And I'm going to mix this for a couple minutes, scraping the sides with the head of the drill and the bottom, going around, up and down, all different directions. We'll mix it for a couple minutes and we'll pour it into a brand new container to ensure we have no soft spots on the counter. We want to use a brand new stir stick. You don't want to use the one where you scooped the B into the A, because now this is, for lack of better words, contaminated. So we want to use a brand new stir stick. We're going to transfer all of that into a brand new bucket, brand new mixing container. Now it's pretty much mixed. Could it be safe to put on the counter now? Possibly, but you want to be safe. There's nothing worse than dealing with soft spots. This ensures that you never have a soft spot. We're going to mix this again, same technique, going up and down, moving it around a little bit for about 30 seconds. I like to spin the drill off in something just to minimize the mess. Now what I'll do is I'll give this to Tyler, but I want to give him a fresh paint stick just in case he wants to scrape it out. So this is ready to go for a base coat.
All right, so we want to immediately get this poured out of the bucket. Obviously this needs to coat the whole counter. So the best way to do this is start out with smaller beads, get the beads all over the counter, everywhere that you're going to be coating, and then we can come back and add to them. We want to try to get those beads the same width all over the counter, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So since this island is obviously wider than the other counters, we're going to go 2 beads out here. And again, I'm starting small. We can come back and add to it. We don't want to have to scrape a bunch of epoxy up off of one counter or section and put it to the other one. It's just a lot easier to kind of start small and then add to them as needed. We'll come back up there a little because it goes back into that corner. Did actually pretty good. So what we're looking for is the same width of the bead once that starts to level out. Obviously it's a little thicker over here, so we'll add just a touch more in some of these spots. Anywhere that it's skinny. And then this one could use a little bit here. Obviously some right here. And again, I'm just hitting the thin spots. Trying to get all these to even out the same width. And then I'll save the rest. I won't scrape this out yet. I can scrape this out if I have a thin spot or something. So we'll just set this down. Now the fastest way to spread this thin coat out, using just a squeegee. You can use a flat piece of cardboard. It doesn't really matter. I've even used paint sticks. So it just spreads it out a lot faster. And instead of a nap roller, we're using a foam roller, because whenever you apply epoxy on thin, it's more sticky. It tends to pull out the roller hairs a lot more because it is a thinner coat. It's stickier. So that's why we use the foam roller for this coat. And all we're going is back and forth. The idea of the squeegee is just to spread the product out quick, and then we'll roll it out to even it all out. So what you want to do when you start applying this coat, the base coat, whoever's helping you mix, they need to start mixing all the epoxy, because that's going to take a little bit of time to do all your colors for the dirty pour technique. So it's always good once you start applying this coat that they're starting to mix, and by the time you're done, they're probably getting close to being ready. That way you're not wasting any time. So that's it. That's what we use the squeegee for. And then we'll take our foam roller and we're just going to roll this out. It'll take a second for it to not sound sticky once that roller gets saturated with the epoxy. Notice I'm not really pushing into the tape a lot. I'm just going right along it. So the roller's not making a sound. If it started sounding sticky, that would mean you'd have like some thin spots. You might want to push some resin over there. Notice how it's just gliding, no sound. That's what we're looking for, just a nice, even, thin coat. And that's it. That's how you apply the base coat. So I'll finish these up. Tim will start mixing the product. And again, if you guys are doing this, once whoever starts the base coat, you should start mixing all the colors for the actual dirty pour.
Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm taking my clear, which is my metallic epoxy part A. I'm just dumping it into a 5-gallon bucket. So obviously I have a B for that, and I'm just letting that drain for a minute. I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of my pigmented white. Remember, we used some of this for a base coat over there on the counters. Now we're just going to take the rest of it and we're going to pour it into a 5-quart kit. And when you dump these over, if you dump them over quickly, you run the risk of getting some epoxy caught in the top part of this handle. So after you pour it out and it kind of starts to drip, you can tilt it back up for just a few seconds to try to get some of that back out of the handle, just in case you got some caught in there, and then dump it back over. And you can kind of tell when you've got the majority of it out, when it really starts just dripping, little tiny drips. Like my clear, minor drips. You can definitely wait as long as you want. You're not really going to miss that much product if you just wait till it starts barely dripping. And what we'll do while this white is dripping out, we'll just let that drip for a minute. Over here, is I'm going to mix up the clear. I'm going to pour the B into the clear, and then I'm going to get all the metallics ready, because this has some white and some clear. So I'm going to dump all of the B in, and the B's a lot more forgiving. Very fluid. Again, rule of thumb, when all the streams start going to just drips, you're pretty much good to go. I mean, you can definitely wait around, but once you pour the B in, which is the catalyst, the hardener, the clock kind of starts ticking. So we're definitely going to mix that up. So we're going to mix it up just like we did the base coat of the white with a little bit bigger drill, so we can get it into the bucket just for a couple minutes, moving the drill around from top to bottom. All right, I've mixed this up for a couple minutes. Now, since we're going to pour into these other containers, I don't need to pour this into another container and mix it again, because I'm going to mix it again. And I'm going to split this into 3 containers. So we have 1.5 gallons, so I'm going to split it into these 2.5 quart containers evenly. Notice I'm working on a table covered in plastic because epoxy can be messy. So we want to make sure we get as much out as we can. And I'll set that on the floor on a piece of cardboard. And now this is where our colors come in. So again, we got a midnight pearl and we got 2 truffles. So I'm going to pour them in here and then mix these up, and then I'll mix up my white immediately. Now, it's kind of nice to wear a respirator mask. I need to talk, so I may pull this down periodically, but if you can, mix the metallics in the epoxy, maybe outside, put a respirator mask on. You just don't want the metallics floating around the area where the project is at. Another trick is that I did switch because I mixed up white. I did put a different paddle on, and when I mix up the white, I'll switch it back to the white paddle. But the trick when you're mixing up metallics is you don't have to switch the paddle head out as long as you start at the lightest color and work your way to the darkest color. So I'm going to mix up the truffle, and then I'll do the midnight pearl. All right, now I have these 3 batches made, and it's important to recognize that you have mixed epoxy. So you can take a few minutes, but you don't want to take forever to mix up the rest of the epoxy. So again, I have the part A. It's been draining into this container. Pretty much done draining. I'll mix in the part B. Once I've mixed this for a couple minutes, or maybe about a minute and a half, maybe even a minute, once I think it's mixed thoroughly enough, I'll pour it into another container and mix it again for about 30 seconds, and then we'll make our batches, and they'll be ready to go. Again, I'm going to switch the head back to the white. Okay, I mixed that for about a minute. Now I'm just going to pour all of this resin into another container. Scrape out the sides. Again, this is a very important step because you want to make sure that everything is thoroughly mixed. Notice that when I mixed in the metallics on the metallic epoxy, everything got mixed twice. I mixed it in a bucket by itself, and then when I poured it into the 3 separate buckets and mixed up the metallics, that was the second time it was being mixed. So I'm just doing the same thing with the white. I'm mixing it in one bucket, transferring it to another bucket, and I'm mixing again for a little bit longer. Not long. The second bucket you don't have to mix long in, maybe about 30 seconds. Letting this drip a little bit. I'll spin it off in this container just so I'm not dripping everywhere. Now, we have 2 truffles, a midnight pearl, and a bunch of pigmented white. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take 5 2-quart containers or 2.5-quart containers, and you're just going to begin to make your batches of what we would call a dirty pour. That's what makes our Ligari stone kits so beautiful, is this technique. But we're going to take, this was what, French beige, and we're going to spray this into 3 of these containers at the bottom. We like the spray paint, just adding a little bit of spray paint to the Ligari stone kits because it just adds a little more pop. So we're going to cover it with a towel, and we're just going to try to keep the spray paint upright and just spray the side and just let it get some of that liquid in the bottom of this. Now what I want to do is I want white to be one of the last colors that come out of these kits. So I'm just going to put some white in the bottom of all of these. Even the ones without the spray paint. Just going to put some white in there. We'll take some truffle and midnight pearl, pour those in at the same time. What I might do is I might even take the rest of the truffle and I'll just put it in this last one. I'll take the midnight pearl. I'm just going to set that aside for a minute. We're going to do something with that in a minute. I'm going to pour some more white now. Just layer in the white in here in the whole kit. And we'll probably even finish, try to put just a little bit of white on the top of all the kits too. So we got white in the bottom, white in the middle, white in the top. Now I'm going to take this truffle. I'll split the truffle evenly. Not quite evenly, because some of these kits towards the end. Probably add a little bit more in these. Probably finish off the truffle in this one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some black and I'm just going to put a little bit of black in here. I'm going to leave the rest. I got enough in here. I'm not going to scrape it out. I'll show you what I'm going to do with the black. I'll actually take the black and I'm going to put it in a solo cup all by itself. And when we're all done with the counter, we can make some beautiful accent veins, separating some of the colors. You can even take it and run it all the way directly in the middle of a solid color on the counter. This is what really makes it pop. So we'll leave that. And then we're going to take white with a brand new stir stick. We're going to finish off the top of these. Pour some more white on top. Now similar to what we did with the black, anytime you have a color by itself, you could even do this with the truffle. If you want, you can accent and separate some colors. Like maybe we'll take the rest of this white, I'll put it in this solo cup here. Maybe I'll take the rest of this white and give it to Tyler, and maybe he wants to accent like a really dark spot on the counter and run like a white vein all the way through it. So we'll separate the white. So now we've taken a little bit because I'm explaining everything, but I'm just going to get these 5 batches to Tyler. He's going to do his thing and probably finish up with some of these.
All right, so I got my colors, my buckets. We want to get those out as soon as we can. I'm just going to show you a quick way to kind of map out your design. You can even write it up on a piece of paper and kind of follow that, or you can just go freehand. It doesn't matter. They're always going to look beautiful. But if you want to kind of map out a design or a shape to follow, just take a paint stick and just start kind of running it across there, right? And then it shows me a spot that I can follow, okay? So I like to just go more random the better. Get some curves in there. Something like that. We'll come up here. Maybe do a skinny point here. There's just, you can't really screw this stuff up, guys. So we'll start with that. I'm not going to map out the rest, but again, you can. So we're just going to get right to it. I'm going to take the first one that has some spray paint, and I will start over here and I'll follow this first vein. Pouring out the first time, you obviously have it pretty close to the top, so you're going to want to kind of move slow or pour fast, either way. All right, we got 3 out here. Now I'm going to go pour a couple out on the rest of the counters just so we have similar colors throughout. I'm going to kind of run a vein that's going to go through here right across the sink. It'll look really cool. So guys, I have a little bit left in here. I'm going to save that. It's not going to heat up when there's just a small amount in the bucket, and we're going to switch buckets. So we're going to take this, another one that has the spray paint in it, and just kind of start finishing out these spots that I mapped out with the stick. Now we're going to start on this side, right? Because you can tell we got a bunch of white over here. I'm not down to the white yet here, so we want to get some more of that brown color out here. Now when you start, we want to make sure we're not pouring too much out in one section. So notice how I'm kind of jumping around. That's what we want to do. I got quite a few beads out there. I only have one on this counter, so I want to get a couple more designs poured out over here to help kind of disperse all the product evenly, or as even as I can. Okay guys, we'll save a little bit in there. Now we'll jump to one that doesn't have spray paint, and we'll pour, we got a lot of brown out here, so we'll pour a little bit more out here, and then when we get to the bottom of the bucket where the white's at, we'll start pouring that out here to get some white out here. So when we start pouring in between beads, I don't want to pour right next to one, right? Because this is still going to level out quite a bit. So I want to kind of try to pour in the middle of here, so when they level out, there's more room for it to level out. And again, it's kind of tough when you have a lot in the bucket, but you just kind of move faster. So you'll see a lot of this white will start popping out, kind of like it did over there. There wasn't a lot of white in this one. So we'll go to the last spray paint one where we poured spray paint. And again, we'll start over there where we got a lot of white. So when we get down to the bottom of the bucket where the white's at, we'll jump back over here. All right, again, guys, there's a little left in there. I can use that later. But now, just looking at the counters, we got white all throughout it now. And we're on to our last one. So now we want to be more precise with how we're pouring it out. We obviously need to pour some here in these big open spots. A lot of these spots, like right here, that's all going to level out. I don't necessarily need to pour any there, so I'm just going to focus on the big open spots, right? Fairly simple. Again, pouring out of the container full is a little hard to be precise, so I'm going to start on the biggest areas and kind of pour some out. All right, guys, so I got the leftover residue in all my containers. I'm going to start going through those, just highlighting some of these veins, and then I'll take the white and the solid black and do some like nice skinny fracture veins when I'm all done getting all the resin out. So we'll just start, right, you can see. So I'll just start highlighting. This is going to be white, so I kind of want to run this along some brown veins. And we just try to follow that edge best that we can. You can even run it right down the middle of a brown vein, right? It looks really, really cool. We do another one right here. There's just endless possibilities with these dirty pour kits. And again, it really doesn't matter how you pour them out. They're gonna look beautiful no matter what. Now we got a lot in this one, so this is good. So I'm gonna squeeze it, start fine tuning some of these. I mean, these white spots look absolutely beautiful. I don't wanna cover them all up, and these solid white is from doing the white base coat, right? And then when we pour the beads, it pushes that white up, right? And say this bead and this bead, they start pushing together. It's gonna push that white base coat up and bring it to the top. And that's how we have these solid white veins, which is really cool. So I don't wanna get rid of all of those. So we're just gonna highlight some of them with these leftover residue that we have in the buckets, the resin. This would be a good one right here. This is a really cool dirty pour color here. So I want to get this color kind of throughout the other counters also. All right, guys, so if you want to minimize the white and stuff, which I think it looks absolutely beautiful, you can kind of blend that in, following those veins with your fingers, and I'll show you how to do that because I want to make this back edge. It looks like they all just kind of stop. I want to make this look like it's going underneath, you know, behind the wall, like you set the wall on it or something. So all I'm going to do is just kind of start blending these back edges just randomly. That's going to get rid of, right, making it look like it just stopped there. So anywhere it looks like a bead was just poured out and kind of hit the wall, we want to blend that in a little. And don't worry about screwing the design up. It's going to look beautiful. So like back here, right, it looks like they were just kind of poured in there. So we're just going to kind of bring that out. Just kind of the more random, the better. And then when we hit this with the liquid diamond spray and isopropyl, it's going to look really good. Now I'm not worried about hitting the front faces because again that's going to flow over and bring the design down the edge anyways. I'm just worried about anywhere that it kind of just looks like something was poured out. It's not like a natural shape. And then I'll go around and do the same thing out here if there's any like circles or anything I want to kind of blend in just a little bit more. You can kind of fine tune those spots. We can blend this white spot in a little bit just by running our hands through it. Following the same pattern, right, that we have, but that'll kind of chop up that white a little bit. So I'm just hitting just a couple spots, kind of blending them in, making them look just a little more natural. Same thing right here. Doesn't take much, just kind of flow with your design. Obviously you don't want to go crossways, right? Notice I'm going with the design every time I touch it. But again, it doesn't take long to just touch up some of these spots that don't look like something that would happen in natural stone. So again, I'm not breaking up all the white, just some of them. Just gives it more of a natural look if they blend together on the edges than just a solid. You know, some of these are cool, like we'll leave some of these because that's, you get colors like that in natural stone, but not a lot of these like rounded edges or stuff like that. It's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm gonna actually get a little white back here, so I'm gonna dab in the white and just kind of run some veins back in through here, just to get some color back here, so it's not so dark. So notice how fluid the resin still is too. We're not torching it. It's just an amazing product. Plenty working time. Still full cure 7 days. Again, I'm just chopping this up just a little bit, giving it that more natural look. This is looking really good. Still leaving some of those solid lines, solid white lines that are in there, those veins. I'm not trying to get rid of all of them. Just blending some of the edges in. Notice how I'm just going with the pattern. And guys, you can work with it as much as you want, right? You can't really take it away once you blend it, so just keep that in mind. All right, guys, so I'm happy with it. Again, it's totally up to you how much you want to blend in, but you can tell the spots that I hit, it brings out other colors and once you hit it with your fingers, so it's really, really cool. So the next thing we're going to do our liquid diamond spray using 91% isopropyl alcohol, and then we add our liquid diamonds metallic pigment into it. So this is going to add a lot of sparkle to the surface, and it's also going to create that dispersing effect as well. So the liquid diamonds is a little thicker metallic powder, so you got to kind of shake it up good. We want to make sure it's spraying good, and then we're just going to spritz it just like we would. This is going to add a little bit of sparkle to the top. Shake it as you go. All right, guys, so after spraying the dispersing effect, the isopropyl with the liquid diamonds, I'm gonna finish this off with some black and solid white fracture veins. Now, obviously, white, I don't wanna run it right along a white because it's not gonna show up. I wanna go where there's dark colors at for the white and then light colors for the black. So I got my epoxy here. To do these skinny fracture veins, you wanna squeeze that cup so you get a nice tight opening so it doesn't just flow out fast, and then map out where you want to do it. Okay, so I'm going to run a black one right along this vein here. Okay, and I'm going to try to keep it right on that edge, try to follow that edge exactly. So this really adds a lot of character to your tops. I'm going to do a thicker one on this one that I just did, and then we'll get a little more on the other counters. All right, guys, now we'll do the white. Same thing. Obviously want to do it on darker areas, which we can kind of follow one of these patterns here. All right, guys, so I did this one. Not a huge fan. So cool thing is I'm just going to blend this in real quick, kind of tone that down. And that's it. And then we can just spray that with the isopropyl, and it's going to just make it blend in like the rest of the top. So we already sprayed the liquid diamond, so now I'm just going to do a little clear. Just spritz the whole surface real quick. And if you guys are obviously, you know, in a non-well ventilated area, you probably should be wearing a mask, because it does, isopropyl does have an odor to it. All right, so these are basically done. A couple things I want to point out. When you're spraying the dispersing effect, sometimes if you have thin spots in the resin, it can create like a fisheye, or it can open up the resin and go down to the primer. If you have those spots, you just pat them in with your finger. You can even dump a little product in that area. You want to make sure you don't have those. It's never good to coat your counters and then leave and assume everything's going to look good. You always want to kind of babysit them. Next thing is when we pull the tape, it totally depends on the temperature in your environment, but we're usually 1 to 2 hours. We're pulling the tape and letting the resin flow over. Obviously, we're in a colder warehouse, but the best way to test it is you'll see when I pull this tape back, the resin's just going to start flowing. See how fast it's moving? It's moving really, really fast, right? It's just flowing off. So we wouldn't want to pull the tape right now. So we obviously need to wait for that. We want to be able to pull this tape back and the resin just barely be moving, okay? There's plenty of resin on the top to roll down our edges, to coat our edges. So we're not worried about not having enough resin. And when we get to that point, I'll show you what you're looking for as far as how fast or how slow the resin's moving down the tape. All right, so it's time to pull the tape, and I'll show you what we're looking for. I'm going to pull this tape back, bend it down, and you're going to see how slow the resin will start to run. See how it's just barely moving? Might not look like it in the camera, but it is moving. So this is the perfect time. Again, you don't want to wait too long. But a lot of times this resin will just flow for quite a while, because again, we have it on so thick on top, there's a lot of resin to flow over. So we're just going to tear the tape. I'll start right here. And this obviously has a lot of resin here, as you can see, so this is going to want to just flow right off the bat. You'll have some spots that are thicker, some spots that are thinner, but real simple. So I'm just pulling this down so it kind of coats that as I pull away. And again, this is a really thick edge, so this is going to flow over real quick. So you can see right where we pulled the first time, it's already coming down. Now the reason we wait is because it's going to carry that design down, but it's not going to affect the top, and we'll actually get, instead of straight down veins, it'll actually flow over at angles. So you'll see a lot, like look at that. It's at an actual angle because the resin sets up. So it looks more natural. It looks like it's actually cut out of a slab of real stone. Yeah, really cool. So again, guys, this will still make it to the bottom. I mean, look at that, coming down at an angle. That's the only way you can get that in epoxy is by doing this technique. If you do it without tape, the resin's too fluid, it just flows over, and all these veins and stuff would just go straight up and down right over the edge. Doesn't look as natural. All right, while your gloves are still dirty from pulling the tape, we're gonna go around the counter and just rub in any spots that aren't coated. So like anywhere, right? I don't have to touch up here because it's all been coated. Obviously there's nothing there. We'll kind of get some epoxy in there, brush it underneath here. So we just want to get rid of any bare surface that doesn't have epoxy on it. So don't worry about messing the design up because this is still going to flow over quite a bit. So notice how it kind of screws that design up. We'll come back in about 5-10 minutes and that'll all be filled in from the stuff that's flowing over the top. So we're just getting rid of surface tension where there's no epoxy, and that's going to allow it to flow over evenly. And again, I'm not hitting anywhere where it's all covered. I don't need to touch that. Just this bottom edge a little. This side's all really good. Look at this. So this is where we brushed in the edge and got rid of the design. Look, it's already almost to the bottom already. So that's what I mean. You don't have to worry about screwing the design up because it's still going to flow over. But look how these veins are coming down at an angle. The only way to get it to do that is this process right here. All right, so obviously the edges are done. You kind of want to babysit them, make sure you don't have any, missed spots again, or sometimes you'll even get spots where they'll look like a run. You can kind of feather those in either with the glove in hand or just a paintbrush following the design, right? We don't want to go back and forth after these have already flowed over. The last thing we're going to do is scrape the drips off. It's still a little early, it's still going to drip, so you might have to do that periodically over the next hour or so. But since it's getting sticky and the resin's setting up, we want to use something that's flat and sharp, so we like to use putty knives, and I'll show you how we do it. We just come under the bottom and we just run that off, and this will help kind of cut that off instead of building up. If you're using like a paint stick or something, it tends to want to build up on a wider surface. That's why we like these skinny putty knives. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. So again, you'll have to periodically scrape these drips off over the next hour or so, and it completely depends on the temperature of your house or environment. And then the last thing, whenever you're doing spray paints, anything like that that's going to be on the surface, you always want to top coat it with either our glaze coat or our urethanes. That's going to lock everything in, keep it from wearing off, and it's also going to add a lot of durability to your countertop. So just keep that in mind. Now, if that isn't easy, I don't know what is. Simply pour it out, let the product do the rest. and you're going to enjoy your beautiful countertops for years. Let's take a closer look at them.